Thank you all so much for being here. We're super excited for Paul's Maine native turtle presentation. If you would like to introduce yourself, just say hi in the chat box, maybe say where you're from, where you live. We've had people kind of logging in from really all over the country, and it's kind of fun to see who's with us today. And let's see, yeah, just share your name and where you're from. This is a webinar series, Friends from the Field, co-hosted by Blue Hill Heritage Trust, and I'm the outreach coordinator, Lander, and then also Island Heritage Trust, and Jake is here representing the Island Heritage Trust. And I think he's going to say a few things about our tech housekeeping, and then we'll introduce Paul.
Thanks, Lander. So everyone, I'm Jake. It's really nice to have you all here. So a couple of features you might see on the bottom of your screen are, one of which is the raise your hand. It's a great feature. It allows you to speak to Paul at the end of our presentation. So you don't have to share your video screen, but you will have an opportunity for like 10 or 15 minutes at the end to voice your question yourself to Paul. We have a chat, which you can, touch base with Lander and I throughout the presentation if you'd like. We will save the questions for the end of the presentation. So if you want to type them out as the slides are going through, you're more than welcome to. We'll do our best to kind of manage the order and get back to them. But you're also welcome to just wait until the end as well. And then we'll give everybody their turn. So with no further ado, I think I'll hand it back over to Lander and she can introduce our wonderful presenter.
Thank you, Jake. So Paul Powers is with us this evening. He is a Maine Master Naturalist and a longtime wildlife photographer. He lives in Addison, Maine with his wife Barb and their 3 dogs. And he has a beautiful presentation. I've had the privilege to see parts of it, and it's going to be really, really wonderful. And we're so happy to have you here tonight, Paul.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And so without further ado, let me see if I can do this. We'll get our screen going. Now, can everybody see the screen? Can you all see it? Okay. All right, we're going to start. Tonight, I'm going to enjoy talking about Maine's native freshwater turtles. These are our turtles that we call native. They live here in Maine year-round, and we're going to get started. So, but a little bit more about what we're going to talk about. First, I'd like to offer a big support to our major support for this webinar, which is provided by both Blue Hill Heritage Trust and Allen's Heritage Trust as well. I'd also like to offer additional support, which was provided by Unity College, Chewonki Foundation, the Center for Wildlife, the Seven Lakes Alliance, and the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. So a little more, just a little bit more about me. My name is Paul Powers, and it was mentioned, I have been a wildlife photographer the last 25 years. But in that past 25 years, I primarily focused on photographing our wildlife friends in their natural habitat. And it's not until I enrolled into the Maine Master Naturalist program and was assigned a capstone project that had to deal with the native reptiles and amphibians that we have here in the state of Maine, that I changed and did a 180-degree turn in my photography. Most of it was, like I said, in the field. And then just recently, I've converted over to doing studio photography. And as you're going to see through the photographs in the upcoming presentation, each one of these wildlife ambassadors was photographed on location at their homes, be it in any of the nature centers that I may have found them. They were photographed on an individual basis on a pure black background, just drawing full attention to the particular subject. So here I am photographing on location. This happens to be Unity College. And as mentioned already, these are wildlife ambassadors, which means for some reason, they're not going to be able to be released back in the wild. So just a little bit about how I photograph. What I do is I set a limit of only 15 to 20 photographs as not to bring on any additional stress. If I don't capture that particular image within that 15 to 20 photographs, then I stop. And the handlers remove the subject from the background, and we move on to the next. Here, I never ever touch any of the subjects as well. Each one of them is handled by their human handlers. So the one lovely thing about turtles is that they never look busy. They calmly browse the forest or sun themselves on a log, appearing to live a life of leisure. Or is that really the case? 1 in 5 reptiles worldwide are in danger of extinction, with more than 50% of the recognized 350 species of turtles and tortoises are threatened with extinction. Here in Maine, the situation is even much worse. Over 70% of Maine's native freshwater turtles are listed by the state as either endangered, threatened, or under special concern. So what would a world without turtles look like? And what did they do for us? Well, we know that turtles are threatened. This happens to be a blandingii turtle, and this is extinct. This is on the endangered list. We know that turtles are underappreciated. This happens to be an eastern box turtle. It's also listed on the endangered list. We know that turtles are reptiles, and this is a painted turtle. Fortunately for us, they're common throughout the state of Maine. They're timeless. They have been here since the beginning of time, since dinosaurs roamed the earth. This is a little musk turtle. It is listed as special concern in the state of Maine. They're legendary. Folklore goes all the way back to recorded history and deals with the turtle. And this is a spotted turtle. It's threatened in the state of Maine. They're environmentalists. They're farmers. As many of us will learn, that turtles will have a tendency to want to go into our gardens, possibly even eat our strawberries. And on the way out, or I should say on the way out of the other end of the turtle, they're laying the seeds throughout the forest, populating it with natural habitat. This one is a wood turtle, and it's listed under special concerns. And they're also scavengers. Can you imagine what this world would be like, what the smell would be like if we didn't have scavengers that were eating decaying flesh? And the best one known to do that is our common snapping turtle. And right now they're listed as common in the state of Maine. So a little bit about the turtle folklore. Our North American Native Americans believe that turtles carried the world on its back, and when the earth shakes, it's because Mother Turtle is stretching. We find something very similar in China. The turtle is the only sacred animal. It represents wisdom, longevity, and wealth. And they believe markings on its shell represents heaven, earth, and the universe. And in India, turtles represent the second incarnation of their god Vishnu. Also, turtles is depicted in many forms of art as carrying the entire world on their back. So 7 + 1 = 8. We all can do our math, but what does that really mean? Well, that means we have 7 native freshwater turtles in the state of Maine, and we have 1 introduced species, totaling a total of 8 turtles that you may find or have the opportunity to see on your next walk into the woods. So what are they? Well, we have the eastern box turtle, we have the spotted turtle, we have the blandingii turtle, we have the common snapping turtle, we have the musk turtle, we have the eastern painted turtle, we have the wood turtle, and the red-eare slider. So a lot of people ask me, hey, what's the difference between a turtle and a tortoise? Well, the major difference between the two is that a tortoise dwells on land, while turtles live in the water some or nearly all the time. And a quick overview of what the external skeleton system of a turtle will look like. And I want to point out 2 very important anatomy parts of this particular spotted turtle. The first one is the carapace, which is located above and it's known as the top shell of the turtle. The second one is the plastron, which is the bottom part of the turtle. Our turtles are various eaters. They're either omnivores, which eat both plants and animal origins. They are carnivorous or carnivores, eating on flesh, or herbivores, primarily food sources plant-based. So here's an eastern box turtle. It's also listed as endangered, but I'd like to introduce you to Carolina. Carolina is a wildlife ambassador. Her home is now at the Chewonki Foundation. She travels the state educating people about the diversity of our reptiles and amphibians. In fact, she was my first introduction into the important role that they play here in the state of Maine. The reason she's an ambassador and she cannot be re-released back in the wild, her DNA testing says she's not a native Maine turtle. In fact, the biologists have determined that they do not want her to be re-released back into the wild, that in case she would happen to mate with a native turtle, it would have some bearing on their DNA going forward. So an eastern box turtle, well, they're Maine's rarest turtle, rarest reptile. They're found primarily in the southwestern part of Maine. They're woodland species, and they have an 8-inch carapace, the carapace again being the top shell. A lot is determined by the size of the carapace. Primarily, it focuses around their sexual maturity age. They don't necessarily reach a sexual maturity age based on years, but on the size of the carapace. That's why it plays such an important role. Here are two eastern box turtles. One is a male, one is a female. Males are larger, thicker tails, red eyes, short and curved claws on the hind legs, and a concave plastron, which is the lower part of the shell. Females have yellow-brown eyes, long, straight claws, and convex plastrons. For our purpose, the turtle on the right is the male. They have the ability to completely close their shell. That's where they get the name box turtle. But they do have a soft shell up until the age of 7, which makes them very prone to be eaten by various predators such as skunks and raccoons. But if they manage to get beyond age 7, they can live up to 100 years in the wild. The mating season usually ranges from spring to October, and during the courtship, males will actually circulate around the female, bite their shell, and produce a pulsating effect using their throats. And females can store and use sperm for the fertilization of eggs during a period of 4 years. They lay 3 to 8 eggs from May to July and nest in the sand, an incubate period for 3 months. They're omnivores, which means they eat other animals and plants. Their diet usually consists of slugs, worms, insects, salamanders, fish, birds, frogs, eggs, fungi, berries, and roots. And they only occupy a territory of 750 feet in diameter. They're not very aggressive. In fact, they will let other eastern box turtles walk through their territory. But it's important to note here, if we should find a box turtle and remove it from that particular area where we found it, we're basically maybe even subjecting the turtle to death because it has everything it needs within that 750-foot range. And it's the best advice that I can give you is if you see it there, leave it there. So here's a little fun fact. In hot weather, they use saliva to keep their heads and front legs cool, and wee on their back legs to keep them cool. Yuck. So we're going to play a little game throughout this presentation. It's called the shell game. So this is the first question of the shell game. On average, how many bone plates make up a turtle's carapace? Is it A, 1? Is it B, 50? Is it C, 100? We're going to give you 1 minute to go ahead and plug in your answers. Then we're going to show the results, and then we're going to explain the correct answer.
Awesome. We're getting a lot of responses. I can see them coming in.
Okay, good.
Another 30 seconds or so if you want to plug in an answer if you haven't yet. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to share the results. Paul, can you see them?
I can. Excellent. We had 67% of you got the answer correct. The carapace is a fusion of about 50 bones. But please keep in mind and keep remembered that the turtle shell is a living tissue and that it's quite sensitive to the touch. Avoid tapping on it. Never strike the turtle shell against another surface. And aside from the possibility of injuring the shell, it can be stressful for the turtle. Here's a spotted turtle. This little spotted turtle's name is Percy. This is a male. It's approximately 4 to 5 years old. Its home now is the Center for Wildlife in York. Percy was one of those unfortunate spotted turtles that was caught up in the pet trade business. An illegal pet trader came into the state of Maine, confiscated Percy, took it back to Connecticut for the purpose of breeding it and then selling either the eggs or the hatched turtles into the pet trade business. Since then, Percy has been returned back to the state of Maine and is now living out the rest of its life at the Center for Wildlife, and has become a wildlife ambassador, educating the public both on the demise of the turtle population here in the state of Maine due to the pet trade business and also poaching. The spotted turtle here in the state of Maine is listed as threatened, but it is found in marshy meadows, swamps, bogs, small ponds, ditches, and shallow bodies of water. Their population is usually found in York and Cumberland counties, with a separate population occurring along the coast in the interior of central Maine, as far north as Farmington, and even into the Bangor area. Their carapace is only 5 to 6 inches long. They're omnivores. Their lifespan in the wild is anywhere between 25 and 30 years. And they're the only Maine turtle with distinct yellow spots on a smooth, low, black carapace. Their sexual maturity is reached about age 7 to 10, and mating season is usually March to May. Once mating season has occurred, they will go and lay 3 to 6 oval-shaped eggs with thin, flexible shells. So here's a little fun fact about spotted turtles. After laying her eggs, as most turtles do, she will go one step further in disguising the nest. She will smooth the dirt by dragging her body over the ground. Are you ready? Here's question number 2. The shell game. Pick the spotted turtle shell. The carapace. Is it A or is it B?
We've had a few people join us in the last couple minutes. So this is an interactive presentation, and there'll be polls throughout in which you get to answer some questions that Paul has for you. So if you haven't had a chance, plug in your answer. Okay, I think I'm going to share what we've got.
Congratulations. Everybody got it. It's 100%. It is A, only Maine turtle with distinguished yellow spots on a smooth, low black carapace. Adult turtles may have anywhere from a dozen to 100 spots of individual spots all over their shells. Congratulations. Good job. Here's a blanding turtle. This blanding turtle is a female. She is still with eggs, but her age is somewhere around 75. This particular one is now calls the Maine Wildlife Park its home, which is located in Gray, Maine. That's the Maine Wildlife Park. That is now her permanent home. Our head herpetologist for the state of Maine, Derek York, found this particular turtle way, way, way up north in the Prescott area. Derek, being familiar with where this particular turtle should be found, realized that it was way out of its location. And because it did not have an aggressive nature, he also realized this was probably kept as a pet. But now it's living out the rest of its life as a wildlife ambassador, as I mentioned, at the Maine Wildlife Park. They're semi-aquatic, they're isolated coves, weedy bays, and further inland and shallow marshy waters in pools. Their higher populations are found in southern Maine and in York County, with a few locations in Cumberland County. That's how Derek was able to determine that this particular turtle was way out of its location. The carapace is usually a medium size, 7 to 9 inches long. As you can see by this photo, there's a deformity in the shell. And this was probably contributed to the fact that this particular turtle, when being raised as a pet, was fed an improper diet. So once again, I'll overemphasize the fact that if you see them there, leave them there. They're omnivore in the wild, and their diets consist of crustaceans, snails, insects, berries, and grasses. They can live to be 70 to 80 years old, and there are some that have been located in southern Maine that have been well in excess of 100 years. Their yellow undersides of their necks, which is located right here, is a great distinguishing characteristic for you for IDing whether or not you have a blanded turtle. Their sexual maturity occurs at age 15 to 20 years of age. Their mating usually occurs May to June in the water. And females will walk anywhere between a mile to a mile and a half, returning to the same site year after year, laying 3 to 17 eggs. So a little known fact is the fact that they are semi-box turtles. It has a hinged plastron, allows the turtle to close the front half of the shell tightly, but still leaving the back end exposed. So the eastern box turtle is the only turtle that can completely enclose itself within the shell, but our blanding turtle comes close in being able to only enclose itself in the front end. Shell game number 3. Is this a view of a carapace or plastron? A for carapace, B for plastron.
All right, I think I'm going to share. Looks like we've got a lot of answers.
Okay. Correct. This is a plastron. Another 100%. Congratulations to all 26 of you. This is a protected plate armor which covers the underside of the turtle. Okay. The common musk turtle. This I know very little bit about this turtle. In fact, it was very fortunate for me when I was out photographing at the Maine Wildlife Park. I was photographing some of their other turtles, their wood turtle and the blanding turtle, for particular interests. But this one had just arrived 1 or 2 days before I got there. So, but this is a common musk turtle. And so they are strictly aquatic, permanent bodies of water. They're often found walking on the bottom of the water rather than swimming. Their northern range, we're at their northern range. This Maine is at the furthest northern part of it where their habitat consists. They're mainly in the coastal regions. And they're the smallest of Maine's turtles, only about 5 inches. Imagine it can fit in the palm of your hand. They're carnivores. They eat decaying flesh, small fish, aquatic insects, snails, and freshwater clams. In the wild, they can live up to 30 to 50 years in the wild. And they have barbels, which are sensory organs, little protrusions that come out of their chin and underside of their neck, located just about there and there. What this allows them to do is, because they are primarily bottom feeders, and they will spend almost a majority of their time on the pond bottom, and they're seeking out food. What they'll do is they'll use those barbels to be able to feel out as and become sensory organs to allow them to find out where their prey is. They have an extended breeding season. It can last anywhere between April to October. And female turtles reach sexual maturity at 9 to 10 years of age, and males somewhere between 3 to 4. And females, this is about one of the only times that they will actually leave the water. So females will briefly leave the water in June to lay between 3 to 9 eggs. So here's a little interesting fact. Common nickname for the musk turtle is stink pot, because of its ability to expel a rather repulsive, musty scent from the glands on its plastron when disturbed. Question number 4, shell game, true or false? Musk turtles have a smaller plastron than most other turtles, exposing more skin around their plastron. Is it A, true, B, false?
All right, any last answers before we share results? Okay, here we go.
Oh, congratulations. The answer is A. 92% of you got it right. Their plastron is relatively small, offering very little protection for their legs, and have only one transverse interior hinge. The only other turtle that has a very small plastron, believe it or not, is the snapping turtle. Oh, here's the common snapping turtle. This one is a wildlife ambassador for the Center for Wildlife in York, PA, or York, Maine. It is found in any marsh, streams, or lakes, and occasionally in brackish water. Throughout Maine, except for the extreme north and northwestern highlands. And this happens to be Maine's largest turtle, averaging around 17 pounds, with a carapace of around 18 inches long. They're omnivores. You would imagine you'd think they were strictly carnivores, but they're omnivores. They eat aquatic invertebrate, decaying flesh, but they also eat fleshy shoots of cattails and pickerel reeds. In the wild, they can live up to 30 years in the wild. Again, here in the state of Maine, they are listed as common. And females can reach sexual maturity at around 11 to 16 years of age, and 5 to 7 years for males. And they will travel anywhere between up to 2 miles to nest in sandy and gravel soil. And they will lay anywhere between 20 to 80 eggs are laid and hatched by late summer. Now, the number 20%, that represents, even in an undisturbed, they've done studies where even undisturbed egg nesting sites, that only 20% of the eggs laid will actually hatch. So keep that in mind. Their incubation temperature also has a lot to do with their sex. The warmer the temperature, the more likely they're going to be female snapping turtles. Shell game number 5. Whose carapace is this? Is it A, common musk turtle, B, common snapping turtle, C, painted turtle? Oh, close one. It actually is the common snapping turtle. Look at the tail end of the carapace. It's jagged. There are two turtles in the state of Maine that have that jagged end on their scutes. The common snapping turtle is one. The second one is the wood turtle. The wood turtle has less pronounced jagged end. Here we have an eastern painted turtle. This is Lotus. Lotus's home now is the Center for Wildlife. Lotus was found in a bucket of water in an abandoned house. She never had the opportunity to crawl out and unfortunately developed shell rot. This is why she could not be released back into the wild. So she is now being taken care of. She is a great ambassador and probably one of the most beautiful turtles that we will find here in the state of Maine. I also hear from her handlers, she is one sassy lady. So they prefer quiet, shallow ponds, marshes, bogs, slow-moving streams. They're found out throughout most of the state. Their carapace will grow anywhere up to 7 inches long. They're mainly carnivores, eating insects, snails, vegetation, and other decaying flesh. They can live up to 25 to 30 years in the wild. And we all know them here in the state of Maine as sun turtles. They get that name because these are the turtles that you'll see as you walk along ponds or lakes, basking in the sun, usually on a log or rock. They're doing that for two purposes. One, they're drawing vitamins from the sun as they expose themselves, and they can stay on that log up to, if undisturbed, up to 6 hours. But the second thing is they're killing the parasites. The sun is actually killing the parasites that have attached themselves to the sun turtles. Their mating season is usually spring or fall. Their sexual maturity, males, females up to 6 to 7 years. They will lay anywhere from 5 to 11 eggs in June or July. Late afternoon is their preferred time for laying eggs. They're white elliptical in shape, and it will take 65 days to incubate. Here's a little fun fact. A male will initiate courtship with a female by stroking her face with his front claws. Shell game number 6. Can you determine an age of a turtle by counting the rings on its scutes? Is it A, yes? Is it B, no? Or is it C, maybe? Ah, good. We got, it was very close, but 64% of you got the correct answer. It's C. Rings only develop in time over proper feeding and the scarcity of food. So the answer is maybe you can count them, but it's usually the rings associated on their scutes is determined by how abundant they have a food supply or how poorly they ate. So that's the determining factor. So the wider the ring, the more properly they were able to eat. And sometimes those rings will look like a hand grenade went off. And if that's the case, then you can almost say that that turtle was raised in captivity. Here's a wood turtle. This is Woody. Woody is listed as a special concern here in the state of Maine. They spend time in the uplands as well as rivers and streams and mostly considered terrestrial. They're throughout and they are found in most drainage areas throughout the state of Maine. Their sculpture carapace length is anywhere between 5.5 to 10 inches with a width of 4 to 9 inches. They're omnivores, many different plants and animals. They can live up to 40 years in the wild, and they're highly intelligent. This particular turtle is also highly sought after by the pet trade industry for its intelligence versus its beauty. I also find it to be very beautiful, but these turtles have been equated to have the same IQ level of that of a rat. And the way they have determined that is they will put these turtles in mazes. And the wood turtle is the only turtle that was able to manipulate the maze on a comparable intelligent level, that of a rat. People that have raised them at home or caretakers have noticed that when they let the wood turtle go, the wood turtle can actually determine that the kitchen is where the food can be found and the bathroom is where the water can be found. In the state of Maine, we call them old redlegs. Sexual maturity is 11 to 12 years. Mating usually occurs throughout the year, but it peaks in the fall. And they prefer sandy gravel areas throughout June to July, with 5 to 12 off-white eggs, elliptical, 1 to 2 inches in length. Now, the one thing you might have noticed about Woody's missing its 2 front legs. And the reason that happened is, well, it's actually not determined. What they're thinking is because unlike the blanding turtle and unlike the box turtle, there's no way for them to protect themselves. And so usually the only way they'll defend themselves is by putting their front legs forward as to fend off the predator that may be attacking them. That usually results in them losing one or both of their front legs. And it's funny because they're very tricky hunters, and they will literally stomp the ground with alternating hits of their left and right front feet. This behavior is thought to mimic the sound of rain, causing earthworms to rise to the surface and becoming quick prey. Shell game number 7, name that protein. Turtles' hard scutes are overlapping pieces of keratin. Keratin is the same protein substance found in your body in your A, bones, B, fingernails, C, teeth.
Sorry, everybody. This one has a little mistake. A is not supposed to be protein. It's supposed to be bones. So just keep that in mind. Okay, it looks like we're ready. I'm going to share.
Well, you definitely can't pull one over on this crowd. Everybody seems to know everything. Congratulations. Yes, it is fingernails. Okay, we mentioned we had 7 native turtles. We just reviewed all of them. We have 1 introduced species. Some would call them invasive species, but for inland fisheries, I like to call them introduced species because there's not enough data on them yet to determine if what type of impact they're having. Yes, they're having an impact. This one happens to be known as a red-eare slider. Right now, there's an invasive species. It is a introduced species here in the state of Maine. They usually live in ponds, lakes, marshes, slow-moving rivers that have soft, muddy bottoms. Remember when we were children, especially me, that you could go to the 5 and dime store and you could purchase a turtle, usually for anywhere from 25 cents to 50 cents. It also came with a little plastic container with a palm tree at the top. This particular turtle was the red-eare slider. They are bred in the southern portions of the state and were sold throughout pet stores all the way throughout the country. But right now, if we are to see any, we'll probably find them in the southern portion of Maine because of the temperature variance. It's too cold up north for them to adapt and survive the winter. But males are slightly smaller than females, and adult-sized carapaces are anywhere from 5 to 11 inches. They're in competition with our native species, especially since the fact that they are being found in the southern portion of the state. And that's also where we're finding both our blandingii turtle and our spotted turtle. Both are listed under special concern for the state of Maine or even endangered. They can live up to 20 years in the wild. And their breeding season usually lasts from late spring to early summer. And their courtship between March, and it usually takes place underwater. They will lay anywhere from 2 to 30 oval, soft-shelled eggs. And right now, here's an interesting fact. Red-eare sliders may not be possessed with or without a permit in the state of Maine. So our final question for today, it's a bonus question. So name that turtle that laid this egg. Is it A, spotted turtle, B, snapping turtle, C, wood turtle? Oh, okay, close one. It's actually a snapping turtle. This is a snapping turtle, and it's kind of a misleading photograph. I'll admit that. Snapping turtles usually lay their eggs in sand or gravel, and this one happens to be a little bit on the fringe of where that nesting site was, and ended up on the grassy part of it. So it is a snapping turtle. So really, what are our biggest threats that are facing our native turtles here in the state of Maine? Habitat fragmentation and loss obviously comes to the top of the list. Climate change coming in close second. But two that I really want to put an emphasis on are roadkill and good intentions. Throughout the presentation, you heard that mating season usually occurs in the early part of the spring. And then they're on the migration to find nesting sites, usually this month, the month of June. And so what they'll do is they'll wander out onto the roads, and that's when they become a victim of roadkill. So last year in iNaturalist for 2019, they have a survey that they do. It's a roadkill survey on a lot of different species found throughout the state of Maine, but this one happened to concentrate on our turtles. They found 178 roadkills of turtles, which made up 99 were painted turtles, 71 were snapping turtles, 3 were common musk turtles, 3 were blandingii turtles, 1 was a common box turtle, and 1 was a wood turtle, making up 178 roadkills. Oh, I'm sorry, and 1 was a spotted turtle. Here is good intentions gone terribly wrong. This is Snappy. Snappy has a permanent residency now at this the wildlife park, Maine Wildlife Park. Snappy was a victim of being hit by a dirt bike. The individual driving the dirt bike thought she had injured Snappy, so she picked Snappy up, took it home, kept Snappy for 12 years before releasing it over to the Maine Wildlife Park. But in that 12-year period that she held Snappy, she fed it a diet of hot dogs, had it sit on the couch, watch TV, never introduced it to water, and took it to bed with her every night. That's something that went terribly wrong. Again, we could take a look at the carapace. The carapace was never formed properly, and the plastron is almost non-existent. Fortunately for Snappy, she is making a full recovery and has been introduced to water. in a regular snapping turtle diet. So again, we're often asked, okay, great, but what can I do to help? Most importantly, if you see them there, leave them there. Number two, and this is a fun part of it, this is something very exciting. You can become a citizen science in the Maine Amphibian and Reptile Atlas program called MARAP. Here's a website, and I'm sure our host can offer you this particular site. But what this does, it allows us to go out and in our walks, if we come across something that is unusual or something that isn't. The other day, I photographed a garter snake, took a picture of it, posted it, sent it in. And what they're doing is recording all the locations that they're finding this so they get a better, accurate representation of where these animals are located. So that's the MARAP program. It simply involved taking a photo, filling out some documentation, and sending it back to Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. You can support wildlife centers found throughout the state of Maine. Again, the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife is a great place to go to. In this particular case, it can tell you where and if you do find an injured species, where you can take it in the different sites. And it also goes into great detail, letting you know what particular licenses they have and what care they can offer. The other thing that we can do to help is we can help a turtle cross the road. Sounds simple, sounds easy, but it's not. Especially if you happen to be dealing with a snapping turtle. There's a full list of criteria that you have to take in order to be able to do it safely. If you're not properly trained, the only advice that I can give you is you can try to encourage it to go across the road. And I think we all know that if you're moving a turtle across the road, always make sure that you do it in the direction it was heading. And it's headed there for various reasons, as we mentioned. The blanding turtle will go back to the same nesting site year after year after year. And a lot of these turtles will do the exact same thing. This training is free, but the registration is required. Unfortunately, due to the virus this year, both seminars were canceled, but I'm looking forward to attending the one next year. So please keep in mind that our turtles are a gentle bridge between us and the wild. And as I said at the beginning, it's interwoven with a lot of folklore. So tonight, as we drift off to sleep and we dream of turtles, maybe this is what this will mean. If you dream of a painted turtle, you're being asked to explore your artistic side. If you dream of snapping turtles, you must pursue an opportunity that is before you aggressively. If you dream of a box turtle, it's a reminder that you cannot hide from within yourself. And finally, if you dream of a red-eare slider, it's an omen that someone is over-dramatizing an issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was such a wonderful learning experience. We have some questions in the chat box, which maybe Jake and I will ask you. And then I just want to put out there again to our audience that if you would like to ask Paul a question yourself, you can use the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. It's a little blue hand, and I can unmute you and you can ask him yourself.
So thanks, Lander. Paul, we'll give people a minute to get comfortable with the raise your hand feature and ask some of the questions submitted in the chat box. John asked, how is the age of a turtle determined? How often does a turtle have to breathe? Two questions for you.
My studies has indicated that breeding is usually only once a year. Okay, if that was the question, they're primarily going to breed. There are turtles that can maybe possibly do it 2 times a year, but that's not coming to my mind right now. I would say a majority only breed once a year. So how can you actually determine it? You know, it's unfortunate, unless you know the actual date of when the turtle was born, meaning that you observed the nesting site and you're able to record it from there. But still, counting the rings on the scutes is a close proximity to what you're going to get. It's not going to be 100% foolproof. So that's still the way to go. But just keep in mind, the wider the rings, the healthier they ate. The less, the thinner the rings, it wasn't a good year for them.
Thank you, Paul. Another question that we have is, could you describe winter hibernation?
Okay.
Seems like, Leander, your connection is just.
Oh, let me try again. Paul, can you hear me?
Yes. Go
Okay,
ahead.
awesome. We have a question about winter hibernation, and somebody's wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Okay, most of the turtles, okay, the musk turtle, believe it or not, I'm going to single out the musk turtle. The musk turtle has a preferred temperature range of somewhere in the 60 to 75 degree range for temperature for it to stay. Once it gets below 50, it will hibernate. And how does it hibernate? They usually go to the bottom of the pond and they'll stay there. They will, and that is pretty typical of a lot of these other turtles, even the eastern, for the water type turtles. They will eventually determine by the temperature range, and then they will seek out. So what are you saying? Can they breathe underwater for that amount of time? And basically the answer is they do go into some type of hibernation mode that will allow them to stay under the water for that a period of time. More land-dwelling turtles, you got your wood turtle, you got your eastern box turtle, they will find decaying cavities and so on and crawl inside of those and do the exact same thing. They may not go into a complete deep hibernation such as your water turtles, but that's what they'll primarily do.
Okay, so we have a question. Oh, can you hear me? Am I still on?
You
Okay.
are.
So we have more questions rolling in. Somebody's asking what the E stands for. And I'm thinking it might be endangered, but I might be missing another part of the presentation where that question might have fit in. Paul, does that ring a bell?
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, maybe I didn't point that out, and I apologize if I didn't. The state has two full classifications, and these are usually determined by the head of the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. They'll determine the species status based on either endangered or under threatened. Both of these are saying that they're pretty much on the verge of going extinct in the state of Maine. The other one, special concerns, is that they are just drawing attention. They're now starting to see that there might be a trend that they could either end up as endangered or special, endangered or threatened. So the way that it goes is the C means common. For right now, their population is stable. They're doing okay. They're common throughout. It doesn't mean they're common throughout the state of Maine, but they're common. The second one then will be special concerns. They haven't taken the necessary steps to then go ahead and launch it as either threatened or endangered. But they have a special eye. They're keeping a special eye on. The next one is then threatened, which means it's things are happening. Fragmentation loss, disease, pet trade, poaching, stuff like that are bringing more of attention to the fact that these are in trouble. And then the last one, and the one you don't want to have listed, is being endangered. And again, some of it has to do with like the eastern box turtle. We were always at the northern range of their location. So there was never a very heavy population of them to begin with. And we know that only 20% of them survive being laid in the eggs. And then it takes a lot of years before it reaches maturity, and all that plays into a factor. So if we continue to destroy their habitat, we're going to see more of them. We have 70% listed under those concerns.
Awesome. So we have more questions here. Somebody mentioned that they have a baby painted turtle in their yard, and they're wondering when its eggs might be laid.
Yeah, I think we said that the painted turtle was also June that we mentioned. I think it's in the June timeframe that that if they're going to be doing it now. And that's a great point. When they can do that, I mean, I'm gonna show you a book here. I don't know if you can see it. This is really the go-to book that I use. It's Maine Amphibians and Reptiles. It's excellent. And so it will go into more detail. So if you looked up a painted turtle on this particular one, it will do that. So why am I making this a longer answer to your question? Well, if you by chance happen to find where the nest is, maybe a little screening over the nest site after you read this book or do internet research, and protect it from those predators that will be digging up the nest sites. Loose dogs, raccoons, skunks. So right now we could put something over it to protect it until we're about a week away from when the little babies will come out. So that's a good point. Good point. Should know that off in my head when painted turtles do that. Sorry. Okay.
That's all right. Well, this is great. We have a question about climate change and its effect on turtles.
Great question. See, I'm a kind of a believer that climate change can work in favor or not favor, all right? For me, I'm thinking the eastern box turtle is at its northern range. Right now, we are facing a dilemma with our spotted and our blanding turtle, and we're primarily having them focus to stay in the southern part of the range. If climate change is affecting our environment with warmer temperatures, could it be a possibility that these turtles could do a more northern migration into less stressful fragmentation properties and do a better job surviving? I mentioned the musk turtle has to have 75 degrees, plus or minus 5 or 10 degrees for it to survive. If that happens to be the case, maybe that's a positive thing. Other things though, climate change, as we all heard, it's having an adverse effect on a lot of different things. So I go both ways, I'm sorry.
I think that was well put, Paul. Lander, do we have any raised hands or?
It doesn't look like it. And I think
Anybody wanted to, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead.
If anybody wanted to ask their question themselves with their audio capability, now would be the time. But let's see, are there any other pending questions, Lander? It seems like you got to most of them.
I think that was all of them. I'm sorry if we lost one of them in the chat box feed. And if we did and you want to ask again, please do. I'm going to share the link to the book that Paul just shared us, the Maine Amphibians and Reptiles. So if you wanted to purchase it from Amazon or just at least take a look at it, that will be in the chat box.
It's great. It's wonderful. It's what I go to my reference right now. And it's leading me into, we already talked a little bit about it. We did a presentation, or I prepared a presentation on the native frogs in toads for the state of Maine utilizing this book. And I'm presently working on one on our native salamanders and snakes again. And so I can't begin to thank everyone who took time out of their busy afternoon on a beautiful, gorgeous Maine day. This is why we all live in Maine for today. And this is wonderful. And thank you so much for allowing me to share this. It was a great thrill for me to be introduced to so many people throughout this state that have dedicated their lives to supporting our wildlife here. From everywhere from the Chewonki Foundation to the Center for Wildlife to the Maine Wildlife Park and Unity College and all the others in between. I can't say enough good things and a lot of good things about our government employees, such as the people at the inland fisheries. They do it every day. They're out there supporting and making this a better place for all of us. It was a great thrill to get into their locations and to actually be able to photograph them. So again, I'm available. If you need me, I will be happy to share my email address, or you can just reach out to me at any time. So Again, thank you so much.
Paul.
Greatly appreciate it.
Paul, if you have a minute, we do have a couple more questions. And I know that we're hitting
Oh, absolutely.
5 o'clock here. It looks like Stephanie would like to ask a question. She has her hand raised. So I'm going to promote her to a panelist to be able to do that.
Okay. Hey.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering, how do you handle snapping turtles? Like, if
How do you handle snapping?
Yeah, if
Go
like,
ahead. I'm sorry.
If you need to move it, or like, so if it's going, like, if you just need to handle a snapping turtle for some reason, is there any particular way you handle it?
Stephanie, that is an excellent question. And yes, there is a very special technique to be able to do it. A lot of times people will say, oh, you can just grab it by the tail and move it. And please do never, ever do that. That will cause injury to the turtle, and it's something that may never, ever recover from. There is a proper technique. It does require wearing gloves, protective gloves. And it's also, remember we talked about the carapace and the plastron, the carapace being the top shell. I'm not encouraging you to do this. I'm just talking about the technique. If you happen to see one, just kind of scoot it off the road if you can. But if you literally grab behind the legs and that part of the carapace and lift it up, you can kind of move it off to the side of the road if it's not a very heavy one. But you've got to be very careful. The second thing, if it becomes unbalanced and you can't do it, you can slide your hand underneath the plastron, in between the back legs in the tail, and gently have it lay on your hand that way and move it. But I do not encourage you to do that. I encourage you to go ahead and enroll in that special training class that you can do it. And there are people out traveling the state of Maine right now in the month of June looking for turtles crossing the road so they can help train people. That was an excellent question. Very good.
Thank you so much,
Do you have anything
Stephanie.
else?
Thanks for coming on board. Okay. Let's see. Jake, any other questions coming through, or should we wrap up? I know we're 4 minutes past.
I don't see any new questions. We got the links shared that people requested, and then you just you posted about the training. So I think we're current. We wanted
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paul. This has been such a pleasure. I think we've all enjoyed it so much, and we will be keeping a recording of it and sharing it on the Blue Hill Heritage Trust website and the Island Heritage Trust website, as well as sending it out to all registrants for this webinar, and we'll send you a copy as well.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great. Again, thank you. All right, everybody have a good night.
Same
Thank you again. Talk to you
Bye,
soon.
everybody.
Bye-bye.